Hi there, it is December 9th, 2014, and we are on Google Rocks Hawaii. It is 7 p.m., 7:02 p.m. our time, and we have yet another great show today, and we'll tell you all about it. It has to do with research, which is a librarian and should be actually everyone's concern, but definitely of interest to us school librarians. And so let me introduce, or let me call on our two regulars and then our two guests, and then we'll go from there. So Jody, could you tell us who you are, please?
Hi, I'm Jody Brown, Kalama librarian, and I love research, so thanks for having this.
Okay, Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle Cole, and I'm the librarian at Halekula Elementary School.
Okay, and Jolie?
Hi, I'm Jole Seroff, and I'm Director of Library Services at Castanea School in Palo Alto, California, and we are a 6 to 12 school for girls.
And I'm sorry I mispronounced your name, Jolie.
Jole.
Jolie's correct. I mispronounced it. And we have Tasha. Tasha, could you introduce yourself, and then you can start the ball rolling and just go right into what this show is all about. That'd be great.
Sure. Well, thank you. Hi, I'm Tasha Bergson-Michelson. I'm also a librarian at the Castanea School. I'm the instructional and programming librarian, although Jolie and I get to do instruction together, which is an exciting and wonderful part of my work. And actually, it's why we're here today, because Jolie and I long ago had a meeting of minds about research skills, teaching them, and what was important. So first piece of good luck is we got to start working together. Second piece of good luck is that ALA is having its annual conference in our neck of the woods this year. It's going to be in San Francisco, which is a few short miles from where we work. As a result, we have the fantastic opportunity to have a colloquium at our school for school librarians called Research Relevance, because what we're interested in is exploring what the most relevant, applicable, and functional research skills are that we can provide our students. Jolie, would you like to talk a little bit about so we're going to talk to you a little bit about the colloquium that we're having, and then we're going to talk about research at our school and some of what we do and what we love to talk to other librarians about, because in the end what we really, really love is learning with each other. So, yeah. Jolie.
That's great. I think one of the things Tasha and I do well together is tag teams. So kind of picking up so as she mentioned, we're going to be hosting 2 days of professional development for school librarians, and that's June 24th and 25th. And also, as Tasha was saying, we really want to focus on what are the key skills for us to be teaching, thinking about our students who are actively learning in the 21st century in a very different environment from that in which most of us were trained to teach information skills. So we're looking at best practices for teaching and the most critical skills for our students in their futures. Another piece that I know Tasha will be excited to talk more about is how having the opportunity to host our own colloquium to craft an experience for our colleagues is especially exciting to us because we have been spending a lot of time thinking about conferences and trying to offer conference sessions that take on different forms, that experiment with what we can accomplish in a conference session. So for our colloquium, we're really looking for proposals that leverage the best practices in teaching rather than kind of having an expert standing at the front of the room and having a bunch of people just sitting and listening. We want to create learning opportunities that are more active, that are more engaging. We're looking for session proposals that are organized like workshops and that will help the participants engage in constructivist learning and create products that they can take back to their schools and apply.
I guess a great way to kind of talk about what that might look like. Jolie and I actually met at a lecture, and then we started talking about what we had in common in terms of instructional goals around research, and we actually ended up we were looking for a way to collaborate, and we ended up deciding to propose a conference session together. And actually, as a teacher, I think some of my best growth experiences have come from planning conference sessions. So Jolie and I plan a lot of sessions together, and this led to us deciding we wanted to just plan 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, or 9 hours or 12, whatever it is, together. But there are other people we collaborate with as well, and it's that when we're sitting, when 2 or 3 or 4 of us are sitting around in a room kind of digging in and getting down and dirty with our subject and trying to figure out how to communicate about it, are actually some of my best learning moments as an educator. And so I think what we were excited about was an opportunity to say, what happens if we do this large scale and we bring a whole bunch of people together and we just roll up our sleeves and go for it. So as Jolie said, right now we have a call open, which once we had the opportunity to come and speak with all of you, we extended the deadline, so the call is still open, and we're hoping that maybe you'll get excited in talking with us today and say, ooh, here's something I'm excited about, and go through that process too and join us, bring what you're contributing at your school and dig into it with a group of other librarians. So I guess we should actually talk a little bit about some of the philosophical frameworks that we brought to our relationship and that have grown as we've worked together, and how they're reflected in our school setting. And one of our jokes is that Jolie is always Jolie is always the theoretical framework woman. So I'm going to hand it over to Jolie to explain some of the theoretical background to what we do.
I knew this was going to be my turn. So, so as an undergrad, I had a double major in literature and philosophy, and I have to say that my training in philosophy has served me very well, or at least it's framed the way that I think. In as much as I can't really think about anything until I get my philosophy clear first, until I know what my main goals are and kind of what my guiding principles are. So obviously, our guiding principles and our thinking about research is pretty far-ranging. There's so many subtopics. But one of the places that seems like a good place to start in framing this discussion was something that kind of catalyzed a lot of our thinking. I can't put my finger on exactly when it was that we did this as a full-day pre-conference for, was it AASL?
It was AASL National last in 2014.
Was that in Hartford?
Yes.
It always falls on my birthday, so I remember that. But that was Tasha and I led a pre-conference together with the fabulous Debbie Abelok, and part of what started our conversation that evolved into this full-day pre-conference was a book that some of us had been reading called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, who's a psychology professor at Princeton and a Nobel Prize winner in economics. This book came out in 2011 and made a big splash. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at it. He examines the science of judgment and decision making, and this was really interesting to me as it applied to what our students are thinking about as they're doing research. So if you'll bear with me for a moment while I kind of talk a little bit about this framework, I think it'll help illuminate some of our thinking about students and research skills. Does that sound okay?
Sounds great.
So again, the idea is thinking fast and slow, and he presents the idea, or he suggests that we do two different kinds of thinking. This fast thinking, which is most of our thinking, that's automatic and instantaneous and intuitive and effortless and even involuntary. So we draw a lot of conclusions without conscious deliberation, using what Debbie Ablock likes to refer to as rules of thumb, or Kahneman, I think, uses the term heuristics, which is a marvelous word, sort of systems that help us make decisions, but they're automated. They're so natural to us. And when we talked about this at the pre-conference, I showed one of his examples, which is a photo of an angry woman. And you immediately know a lot. You have a lot of assumptions about this woman just based on this image instantaneously. So this kind of fast thinking can often be quite accurate and may also even be essential to being a human or living in a society. However, taking shortcuts in our thinking can also create biases, and it doesn't allow us to be critical or reflective, and it's not necessarily the kind of thinking that we're striving to train our students to do. So we have the majority of our thinking that's this instantaneous, unreflective thinking, and then we have slow thinking, which is, in contrast, effortful, deliberate, orderly. It requires you to focus your attention, and it gets disrupted if your attention is drawn away. So the example that we used at the pre-conference is also from Kahneman's book, where he has you do some mathematics. I think it's, you multiply 22 by 47 or something like that. And so you go through a process that you learned, and it takes a little bit of focus, and there are steps, and they need to be done in order. And so this is a different kind of thinking, and also just doing multiplication is obviously not the full extent of what we can do in terms of slow and deliberative thinking. So what we're interested in training our students to do is the kind of slow thinking that they're going to need for success in college, and also possibly, I might contend, as an essential component of citizenship, to be able to reflect and form judgments based on evidence, and to examine your own thinking and so forth. And we felt as we were reading this book that this kind of slow thinking was a key skill for research. So it also struck us that some of the behaviors in our research are also fast thinking, that happen quickly. And we started examining, how do we shift back and forth between slow thinking and fast thinking as we practice our research skills. And this takes me to another point that Kahneman makes, where he talks about how the intuition that takes place in fast thinking of an expert is not the same as the fast thinking of a novice. And so this is where we started to kind of crack into this idea of the tacit skills, the expert skills that we've developed through our training and through lots of conscious, careful practice that enables us to do some high-quality, scholarly kinds of thinking and searching that almost seems automatic. So we started to think about how can we break down the skills that we have learned and internalized for our students, slowing them down, getting them to think and focus and think critically and concentrate, so that they can internalize those skills and begin to exercise the intuition of an expert, to be able to do that thinking quickly, but with quality.
I often
Please.
use the analogy with my students of touch typing. So I remember teaching third graders, right? And you're in a room with third graders and you're typing something, and the third graders' mouths are all hanging open, right? And they're like, "How can you type that?" You're laughing because you have this experience, right? How can you type that fast? How can you do that? And I used to work with a lot of elementary school students on search skills, and we would often use that analogy that it's that research is like typing. At first, you've got your fingers and you're hunting and pecking, but as you practice, there are certain things that are going to become like that 40 words per minute that you're aiming for, and you won't even be thinking about it. And so one of Jole and my goals as educators is to figure out what are those things that we no longer think about because they're like touch typing for us, and how do we slow down our own instruction and make sure that students actually get the skills they need so that they can get up to speed, and they can also, as Julie said, internalize and automate these processes in effective and powerful ways rather than being guided by what happens in an algorithm.
Great. Yeah, I think I'm just looking at my notes that there's a beautiful quote from Thinking Fast and Slow that for me illuminates a lot, where he says that the valid intuitions that we have as experts develop because we've learned to recognize familiar elements in a new situation. And it seemed to us that sometimes those familiar elements are kind of subtle. So we've been about the business of trying to identify the clues and the cues that we see that help us make good decisions. And then the other piece that I wanted to mention is that having expert intuition, having good rules of thumb and a lot of experience as a researcher doesn't give us the answer to our research question. It just gives us the set of tools that enables us to choose the right tool or technique for the need that we have at hand. And so, I particularly like this metaphor of slow thinking because I think that it runs contrary to our contemporary culture, at least here in Silicon Valley, and I suspect in much of the developed world, that speed is really considered a good in and of itself. And I think also because kids tend to be impatient, our students want to find the answer, and we want them to learn how to think and ask good questions and investigate, and to think of research as a process of learning rather than a process of locating proof or support for their position.
So it's funny, Jolie, that you should kind of mention that addiction to speed, because this whole thread actually was originally started on which listserv? I want to say it was InfoLit from ALA. It may have been ILIL. But there was someone who suggested that search engines were only good at answering fast-thinking questions, that they were built to only be for that. And I took deep umbrage. I disagreed with it's the kind of thing that makes me feel things passionately, that kind of comment, because my feeling is that that happens because we allow the tools to look like fast tools, and we don't think about how to slow them down, and we don't teach students how to slow them down. So we essentially blame the tool for the outcome rather than critically examining the education that we're offering. So I think that's kind of like how we got started, and full circle back to the beginning. But this is what we've been working on, and I think actually the whole question of tacit skills, which is what we started to call these things that we do without thinking about them. One of my favorite examples, a kind of a down and dirty example, is that when I was at Google, one of the studies that user experience did in search found that most people either don't see the boldface in search results or don't know what it means when they see it. And they don't really question. This I can tell you, because for my first 2 years at Google, the most common question I ever got was, what does that advanced search button do? And I would ask, well, have you ever pushed it? And people would say, well, no. And so it's like, people see things and they see that they're there potentially, but they don't question what they're doing. And I bring up the example of boldface because for anyone who's taken a search class, for example, in library school, we actually are taught what the boldface means and what the boldface is doing. And back in the old days, if you went through like a LexisNexis training as a librarian, you would be taught, and when you do the search, you'll see here it's in red and in bold, and this is what it means. And so because I came of age as a searcher, with one seat, unmetered access to LexisNexis as my major library, and that's where I really learned how to search. The boldface became an integral tool for me for getting my work done, and I learned to notice it. And so I think as librarians, we're actually taught to notice the boldface, but then it becomes so much a part of kind of just background noise for us that we then fail to turn around and pay that information forward. And so that's one example, a simple example of tacit research, and or tacit research skills. I'll pause here to say that the reason I keep calling it tacit research is we have a hashtag on Twitter, which is tacit research. I put that in the notes for today, because I would actually invite anyone tonight or other times that that you kind of have one of these epiphanies, that you please actually share it there, because we're building a collection of observations that librarians have made and teachers have made and students have in fact made about these kind of innate skills, and we kind of keep that as our record. Jolie, I think you had a couple of we'd like to run through a couple of instructional examples, but
Sure. No, I think one of the things I really like about this paradigm, if I can call it that, this framework, is that it's really flexible, so it can cover concrete skills like understanding how boldface functions in your search results, and it can cover more abstract concepts as well. So I had a couple of examples that I think are pretty different from each other. And the other thing that I think is nice here is that we often can identify the things that are maybe pet peeves or special interests to us personally. That's a great thing to throw up there with the hashtag. If if this resonates with you about something that's a sacred cow to you. For example, something that I often found myself teaching was what I think qualifies as some tacit knowledge that I have about how information is often organized, specifically thinking about websites. So we have a lot of projects where students are asked to create websites, and one of the issues that I saw with the products that are created is that there's no clear system of organization. And I would call this a tacit knowledge because I don't think that anyone took it upon herself to teach the kids that, there are some established conventions for how websites organize information. So that was something that I took on and was pretty successful, helping the kids think about how websites are often organized based on their purpose. And this is actually helpful in terms of evaluating a website for quality or suitability to your purpose. So we had the kids think about, Tasha, should I tell them the example that I use? So you got to remember that we work at a girls' school, and this is a lesson that I've done a lot with sixth graders because they build Google sites. And so I always try to choose examples that are memorable, that are really going to stick with the kids, so that next year when we talk about it again, they'll go, oh yeah, I remember that because that was a strange example. Tasha's really good at that too. So with the sixth graders, we talk about websites about cupcakes, because what sixth grade girl doesn't love cupcakes? And so we look at, a couple of basic purposes that the website might be built for. So perhaps to market to you, or to entertain you, or for information. There's some really general categories. And we discuss what information would be present and how they would expect it to be organized. And then they apply this thinking, this framework, in the organization of their own information. And we come back and reiterate that, so that hopefully for the students that also becomes tacit knowledge that they can pick up by looking at a website. How is it organized, and what hints does that give me about its purpose? Is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
I hope so.
Yeah. Kind of like guiding principles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's that's sort of a more conceptual. Well, maybe that's just the level on which I tend to operate. Tasha, would you pick a more down?
I'm a very down in the weeds kind of of thinker. Well, so my two of my favorites kind of go hand in hand. I I think Michelle, when we met, I was talking about well, predictive search and especially imagining your perfect source and actually reading that source in your mind and using it to search. And actually, I think this can be used in a vast variety of ways. And the example that just sprang to mind was way too geeky for me to go into here. But if everyone wants if anyone wants a really like seriously geeky search issue, feel free to get in touch with me. But a better one that Jole reminded me of this morning is for the past 2 weeks I've been working with our 7th graders on making infographics. So they've been making infographics about contemporary China, and we've been looking a lot at how data is conveyed honestly and dishonestly, and how you can mislead and give misimpressions with data. But we had a really interesting conversation about the term coined, I think, by The Guardian, airpocalypse, which is a reference to the horrible pollution in China. So there was a discussion about the difference. We're thinking about the difference if you're searching with the term airpocalypse. I know as an expert researcher that I get a radically different kind of source using the term airpocalypse compared with when I use the term air quality index. And because I have this knowledge about how language works, just as a reader, as an experienced reader, I build this understanding of essentially register with vocabulary. And in fact, Common Core, I got really excited when, I will tell you, when I originally read the proposed Common Core back when, because there's all this focus in the standards about students understanding different levels of formality of language. And to me, that is clearly related to search skills, which is one of my many very favorite parts of research. And this notion that as I am familiar with level of formality in language, as I become familiar with what kinds of sources use what kinds of levels of formality and what register to communicate, that I can actually then essentially control the quality of my results based on my task by which search terms I choose. And the truth is that when we think about evaluating sources, I think that's like the first step to take on with students, that it's that one can radically change outcome of search results and what you're finding simply by being aware of the context in which your terms are likely to appear. And then the other piece of that, another search-related piece of tacit knowledge that I find incredibly powerful is context terms, which are broadly defined as terms which describe a source in which information appears, which also appears on the page you'd be looking for. So, for example, infographic makes a wonderful context term because whenever anyone shares an infographic, they're very excited and they're like, look at this great infographic. So the word infographic like always appears on the page with actual infographics, if that makes sense. So it makes a great search term where I know what I'm going to get. But the idea that I can put that in the search box, that I can put bibliography, that I can put study, poll. Actually, I love talking with students about study, poll, survey, report, which are all better ways often to find statistics than the search term statistic. And so kind of spending time thinking through what types of sources exist and what the words are that are used for describing them and when they actually appear on a page and how to use them integrated in my search to target my results more effectively is a piece of tacit knowledge that actually has been stunningly effective this year with the students
Indeed.
that I've been working with.
Can I jump in for a second?
Please.
It really is true that we've had excellent impact with students by teaching them how to use the right kinds of context terms in their searches. And I was thinking, as you were talking about, looking at issues of pollution in Beijing and the difference between the kind of sources that you get when you search for air apocalypse versus air quality index. Mm-hmm. And you used a fantastic word, which is register. And another word that came to my mind is bias. And that's something that we've been talking to our students a lot about. And I think possibly constitutes some tacit knowledge, in that we've been trying to teach our students that pretty much every source is biased. And so it isn't that you are looking for a source that's free from bias, but rather that you're looking to understand the bias of your source and how that informs the information that it's giving you. And that if you think critically about bias and combine that with your thinking about the kind of language you expect to see in a source, you can actually effectively search for sources with different kinds of bias. So another thing that we've been asking students to do, or let's say another sacred cow of mine, an idea that I always like to come back to. Okay, I have mixed feelings about this. So how to say this in a politic way. So one of the activities that students at our school often do is debates. And I think there's a lot of benefit for our students in this activity. But there is a downfall that worries me about the debate framework, which is the implication that there are two sides to a given issue. And I think that this is a problematic implication. It often oversimplifies complex issues. And I see that playing out not just in our schools, but in our society. So it concerns me. So in a way to kind of combat this and to make more explicit our tacit knowledge that in fact very few issues have only two sides, we've been working with our high school students a lot around exploring multiple perspectives on complex issues by identifying stakeholders. What might the range of perspectives be around this issue? Who might the interested parties be? And once you've identified kind of, so for example, my topic is green energy, and I know that I need to cover, there's a range of things I'll need to look into, wind energy, nuclear power, water, hydroelectric, etc., right? And so once I've kind of done the basic background research to get a sense of what are the big categories that I need to explore, I can start doing searches using context terms and using the appropriate register to pull sources that will represent a range of perspectives. So this actually leads to another thing that we're kind of experimenting with, which is a common issue for our high school students, is I've taken on a research project. How do I know when I've finished? And I think this is, in earnest. They want to do a good job, and it's hard for them to know when they've done enough. And some students don't do enough, and some do too much. And it's a challenging thing to help guide them through. But this is one framework that has been helpful, is to begin by identifying the key ideas you need to cover. And that might be the range of stakeholders, or it might be the 4 or 5 main topics associated with your idea. And then we've actually been using bibliography, which I know Tasha could talk some more about, as a self-check mechanism. So examining your bibliography to see that all those points you wanted to cover are represented. And then you can feel that you've checked yourself and that you've done a complete job of representing the topic. So there's several aspects of tacit knowledge embedded there. And this has been a huge topic for us, is what is our tacit knowledge as librarians about bibliography? And what does it do for us besides keep us from plagiarizing? So that's that's a whole rich topic. I don't know. We hadn't talked. I don't know if you want to think more about that, Tasha,
Well,
or if you
well,
have another idea.
I was actually thinking. So, I think we got excited and we gave you a fire hose of a bunch of different
Yeah.
fine points that we cover instructionally. And I guess as we were populating our bullet points and getting a little overexcited earlier today, what we had in mind as the starting place was actually to go back to this colloquium that we're hosting, in that, what we really want to do is take any one of the points, for example, any of the skills that we looked at. How do you teach students to use bibliography in meaningful ways? How do you teach students to imagine their perfect source? How do you teach students to use bias as a tool and to understand and work with bias effectively, and not maintain a notion that you can only use unbiased sources? And so for our colloquium, what we're really hoping, actually, if you go to the website, which again I've put in the working doc for this session, it's just castellea.org/research relevance, but all of that is hard to spell, especially Castellea, so it's in the doc. You'll actually see that we have on our front page kind of like a wish list of topics, and it's kind of a brainstorm, again, an excited bullet point list of the kinds of discrete skills. I don't know that they're entirely discrete, but discrete skills that we engage with our students, or would like to engage with our students. And what we're really looking for is people who have their list of discrete topics skills that they want to or do now work with their students on fairly deeply. And what we hope is that people will bring those topics, will submit proposals and bring those topics to our colloquium, and take that opportunity, again, to work with a group of colleagues to both be a leader in helping them move forward in their thinking, but also get the benefit of hearing what other colleagues have to say about that particular skill. So what's exciting, hopefully, is that we hope to hear from you, and we hope that you can join us, and then be able to engage in 2 days of looking at what it is that you actually do as a researcher that brings you excellent results, and that you can do with your students, or do with your students, that actually changes their behavior, and we can work with that. So I guess that's our kind of overarching proposal.
Sounds fantastic. So they would go to the Castellea, I can't even pronounce it.
It's quite all right.
Castellea.org, and I'm looking at it right here, and under Research Relevance. And did you say that your ideas were explore how to? Is that your?
Yeah, so that was when we started thinking about topics that we could immediately think of that might be interesting. But I mean, the whole excitement of this is we can't think of all the topics. So
Right.
we look forward to you sharing topics with us.
Yeah, and for me also, I think it's really nice to have the opportunity to spend 2 days in a conference setting that's a little bit more focused. So generally when I go to conferences, it's, library services. And for me, I think, research for the 21st century and the best practices for teaching it's a little bit more narrow. So we're still looking for proposals, anything that's related to, what research skills are most relevant for today's learners, for our college-bound students, for the citizens that we're educating.
Exciting. Are you close to your limit for proposals, or are you looking for a bunch or a few?
So, well, the good news is that because we are formulating this for the experience we want, we kind of have it open as to how many sessions we end up choosing to have. So I would say that we've gotten some pretty exciting looking proposals that I'm actually really jazzed about so far. And also, I want to know what else is possible.
Right.
I mean, really, I don't know about you, but when I come back from conferences, it's those I just feel so inspired from the conversations I've had. And so the opportunity to provide more spaces for that kind of intense broadening of my own horizons. I, yes, I want them to be as broad as possible. So bring it on, I think is what I'm saying.
That's awesome. Well, the one thing I would like to know, and I'm sure a lot of people would like to know, is are you two presenting?
I was just thinking about that tip my hat a little bit in terms of how much flexibility we have. This is part of what gives us so much flexibility because we haven't committed to exactly what we'll be presenting yet, and neither have we committed the two fabulous collaborators we have standing with us, as I mentioned earlier, the wonderful Debbie Abelok, and also the deservedly well-regarded Kristen Fontechara. I wonder if she's ever been called exactly that before.
But it's so true. Well said.
So the four of us, we can kind of fill any gaps. So once we look at, the proposals that we have, if we think, okay, well, there's a few things we definitely want to cover and we don't have a good proposal for it, then that's what we'll end up presenting on. So, I'm really excited. I'm really biting my tongue not to tell you about some of the things that are already lined up, but there is some flexibility for a few more good proposals to come in. And yes.
I would actually make a pitch because I went through a period where I submitted a lot of proposals to conferences, and if someone out there is feeling shy, one of my favorite strategies for conference proposals is to either reach out to someone who I met in a hallway at a conference and had an inspiring conversation with and say, hey, remember that conversation? Wait, Jole, this is how we met.
Yes.
Remember that conversation we had? Why don't we do a conference session together? And so actually, I don't even know if she and I ever talked about it or if she just brought it up randomly, but I was sitting next to someone at the independent schools section dinner at ALA Annual last year, and she was really interesting. And so I just reached out to her about AASL and was like, hey, let's propose something. And she was like, yeah, I've been working with my students on imagining sources. I'm like, hey, me too. So there we go. So one strategy, find someone who you've always thought was interesting, but never had the guts to reach out to before, and do it. Just do it, because it's so rewarding. And second of all, sometimes if there's something I want to commit to working on, like in the next semester, that I haven't been getting on, even though I've wanted to, I will submit a proposal session or a session, and then that makes me do it. So those are my two recommendations.
Those are great recommendations.
That's broad-based, not just for our particular, but I find that it keeps me honest and trying new things.
Neat. Wow, fantastic. So do you have a limit on the people that you can have?
It is going to be kind of intimate because we're hosting it at our school, which I think is potentially another draw since we are located in lovely Palo Alto, and it's always fascinating to see other folks' schools, and of course our library will be one of the sites that will be in use, and we might be able to get a peek at the fabrication lab and other such things. So our school serves about 425 students, so our campus isn't that big, so that does present some limit. And again, kind of even related to the idea of having the narrower theme of just focusing on research, it also is appealing to me to have a bit of a smaller gathering where you really get to know people and have one-to-one conversations. So, we haven't nailed it down exactly, but my guess is that there'll be 50 to 80 attendees. Something along those lines.
Wow,
I mean, I don't. Yeah,
and exclusive and cool.
Well, our hope is that it's not exclusive.
Okay.
It's open to everyone, but
okay.
well, it's open to every school librarian. But But there is this wonderful thing, you know, one of my favorite conferences is one where culturally you can turn to the person next to you and say like, hey, what you doing for lunch? Like, I've never seen you before. Want to go have lunch and chat? And that's perfectly acceptable. I hate those moments at a conference where you're like, and now, the first time I went to one large conference, I like didn't eat for 4 days because like I couldn't figure out like where you found other people to like go with. I was busy thinking about other things. Anyway, but you know, the idea is like imagine a conference where by the end of maybe even the first day you actually recognize everyone who's there, right? It just seems to me, I don't know, I think we've thought a lot about what we like in conferences and I like talking to the person next to me. I like hearing about the work they do. I like seeing that person again later.
Yeah, we're going to definitely create a number of opportunities for those kinds of connections because I agree with Tasha that very often the biggest benefit that I bring back from conferences are the connections that I make. And Michelle, it was such a pleasure meeting you recently at a conference. Yes. Thank you for inviting us to be part of this. Just a case in point. So thinking about the fact that this is going to be a relatively small gathering, it might also be helpful to know that registration will open in January via the same website. And I can forecast that the cost is going to be about $275. That's going to include light breakfast and lunches on both days. So there are some opportunities for collaborating and meeting colleagues. And then we're hoping also to organize some dinners at local establishments. So that would be, of course, out of pocket, but it would also be another opportunity for those informal interactions that can often be so enriching.
So on the bright side, if you're like me and don't sleep at conferences because there are so many people you can talk to from 6 in the morning till 2 in the morning, we can provide you with that experience. But also, our professional reading for last summer was quiet. So we've also had the opportunity, if you're feeling like, wow, the last thing I want to do is have to talk to people, first of all, there will be name tags. And second of all, we'll try to make it welcoming and not as intimidating as that might have.
I don't think school librarians are intimidating. We're part of a tribe together.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean that's so we've told you about a little bit about our school, a lot about our event, and even more about how we think when we do research. I don't know. I'd love to hear from other people. I'd love to hear if anyone else happened to think, well, here's a piece of tacit knowledge that I have. Not to put anyone on the spot, but
I'm on the spot already.
Sorry.
Well,
you can just breeze right past that.
You know, this is so exciting, but I know that I won't be able to make it because of circumstances.
Yeah.
How do I get on this anyway? I mean, what's going to happen afterwards? Are you going to tell the whole world, all the beautiful knowledge? I'm jealous.
Okay, so now you have to tell Jole I didn't put you up to that question.
Yeah, Tasha wants to publish a book. As her supervisor, it's my job to keep her plans in a manageable size. However,
I just think we could crowdsource something on the spot. That might
I am sure there will be some things published to the web coming out of this.
That would be so awesome.
I know one of the things that I have kind of dear to my heart is to think about ways for people who come to a colloquium to kind of reach out into the future to make some commitments to themselves about work that they want to do. So I'll try and keep that up my sleeve for the moment. But I definitely am sympathetic to the idea of kind of where does this go next. And it's not just those 2 days, but what can we build on that?
Sounds good. Now, go ahead.
No, please.
Well, I was wondering, very sneakily, about, okay, so say I'm a conference goer. What if I tweeted tacit research and told the whole world what was going on at the conference. Would that, in other words, would that be a way that we could figure it out, or are you
Oh,
telling
I'm
people
sure.
not to do
I
that?
actually expect strongly that Research Relevance will be
Yeah,
the
I was just
going
going to say,
hashtag.
I think I've been using that.
But it's okay to do that. So
Yeah,
on those 2 days, I'm going to be watching for that hashtag and learning
absolutely.
all about it. Oh, that's
Right. No, it's definitely not about, keeping this learning private. And I think that, that there's no fear there, because I think we all know, like, there's a lot you can learn from reading the tweet stream from a conference you don't go to, but it's not the same as the experience that you have if you actually get to be there. So I think, they're two different experiences, and I certainly hope that you and anyone else who isn't able to make it to the glorious San Francisco Bay Area will be with us in the tweetosphere.
Yeah, actually, you just gave me an idea regarding that I will be talking to Jolie about tomorrow. But I would say we will commit to tweeting if you will commit to responding with ideas.
Like it.
I will
Right?
respond.
It's all
I will
about the
respond.
engagement.
Yes, definitely. And the timing is perfect because that's the beginning of summer and people can think about what they want to be planning for the next year. So
Mhm.
it's, yeah. And I'm definitely interested in that because our kids are, Google searchers, and I like that saying you said about algorithms. So we're guided by algorithms rather than, slow thinking. So definitely needed.
Well, I don't think you have to be guided by well, as a Google searcher, that reality exists. The
Right.
same
But
way,
you have a choice. You have a choice,
yeah, when you
and you're
walk into a
aware of
print
it.
collection, right, and you know how to control it, right? You are not
A victim.
helpless in the face of what's happening. You're not a victim of your search engine. You are empowered if you know
Yes.
how to use it. You are empowered to do so much.
And it's not
But
just
you
search
need.
engines, but also the subscription databases and other tools that we teach our students to use. I just was working with sixth graders this week to learn to be efficient users of ArtStore, and that was exactly the framework that we were talking about, was empowering them. I don't know if you guys are ArtStore users, but when you kind of dig in, there's all this obscure data that is presented in a way that really only an archivist can make any sense out of. And we just had so much fun with our 11-year-olds asking them to construct their own understanding, giving them a few tools and asking them to explore that. And the teacher and I were just really enjoying how empowered the students were to use this tool independently and to use it at the level. It's such a powerful tool, and so often, and so is Google, and so are many of the tools that we have access to, but we don't use them to the extent of the power that they actually can provide.
And that's often because unfortunately the way that even we're given time to instruct, right? And the teacher's like, I just want you to show my students how to use the databases. Well, okay, but I've done that for the past 3 years. So how about we add some like critical thinking to the mix? And but it's interesting because even I was working last week with some students on WorldCat. We were using WorldCat to find other libraries, right? It's not even like our print collection feels restrictive in a way, to be honest, of what one can look at in print because, well, this is the library, but no, we can go beyond those walls as well, right? I mean, we're very lucky because we have Stanford 2 blocks from us, and they have something of a library, right? They have a
They
pretty
have
good.
about 9 libraries, actually.
Right, so my student who's researching Coco Chanel can go and look at Vogue articles from the time. She can like reach out and touch the primary sources, um, but it's not just the new tools which are potentially restrictive. It's just that we have ways of dealing with that, and we teach them to students. So.
Yeah, actually, I think that bears a little emphasizing that we are very tech friendly and we use a lot of modern technology, but we're also great lovers of books and indexes and you know primary sources, and we're not organizing a couple of days of the hip new apps. Apps can be a lot of fun, but our interest is really in critical thinking and constructing knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what we're up to.
It's awesome. It's exciting. I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes.
Oh.
Any questions from Michelle and Jody?
I think Jody was just laughing at me there.
About what? I missed that.
Oh no, I'm just really excited about the conference. And Tasha, I loved what you said. I know it grew out of your meeting, Jolie, too, that sometimes it's really fun to do sessions together. And it reminded me of something I heard just the other day that through collaboration, that's the way that innovation really grows and happens. And I think that that's something that, Linda, even we've experienced, as this Google Hangout has grown through our collaborations. It's kind of fun. So I'm really excited for this. And I know you didn't want to say too much about the proposals you've received, but I noticed when I was looking at the form, you folks have people can designate the different age ranges. I was wondering if you have proposals in each, for elementary.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we actually have proposals at every level, which is very exciting.
So for someone still thinking of submitting a proposal, do you want to leave it really open, just like you said, what they're working on or what they'd like to work on, or is there a gap, an area that you need that people might think about?
I would say that generally speaking, we're really, really interested. I'm sorry, I'm afraid that I'm going to say this in a way that sounds reductive. I feel like I'm really interested in exploring specific skills that people are teaching, right? Rather than this is what a whole research process looks like necessarily. I want to, like, personally, I would really like to hear what's something that you do that you feel makes a real kind of difference with your students. And it's not so much this is what a lesson looks like as think of it as a backward, right? It's the objective that we reach. Because I think when I talk to colleagues, there are really interesting objectives, essentially, that I had never thought of before, and it's exciting to explore that. Does that, and I guess if you look at like our wish list, on our page, that list is the kind of thing I'd love to see. Like, what is it you do with bibliography?
Well, I think that and that's Michelle. Thanks for the question. I think we're in good shape for a range of things from different age levels, and I think part of the reason is because so many of the topics are flexible and do apply at every grade level. So I usually find myself most comfortable with like a spiraling curriculum model where we revisit the skills at a level that's appropriate to the intellectual capacity of students at each grade level. So you don't just once learn how to build a bibliography that informs a deep, thoughtful paper, or I don't have good examples at the top of mind, but most of these skills that we're teaching, if we're looking at inquiry as a learning model, it applies across the K-12 framework. So I think we'll have some sessions that are focused where people can work with folks who work with the same age students that they do, and we'll have other sessions where it's going to be a little more flexible, and there are some ideas that apply at all grade levels.
But I have to say, it's really exciting to think about elementary school and research skills, because I think there are a lot of real questions. I think there are questions at every level, and it was funny because when I was writing the Google search education lesson plans, originally the goal had been to make grade levels and have like an upper elementary and a middle and a high school. And I found that for each one, I'm like, and for thinking about search terms in this high school lesson, you may want to look at the elementary and middle school lessons and see where your students are. And then I was like, this is ridiculous. So I just changed it to beginner, intermediate, advanced, right? So first of all, any skills that are being talked about at any level may actually, be useful elsewhere. If your students, like one school district I visited a few years ago, the only time the students ever did research was their senior year of high school. They had a 1-month project where it was like everything at once, right? So things that you might be working with an elementary school student on would be perhaps targeted a little differently, but essentially the same basic concepts. That's one. But also, I think there's such an interesting range of challenges as students are coming into literacy and as schools are striving to bring their student body to essentially I'm hesitant to say the same place, but to do a certain amount of leveling up so that students can move forward. I think there's a wealth of really, really interesting issues that we face as an educational community, because that's also when we really need to be setting our students up to run, right? And so while we are definitely, looking across, and I would say I'd love to hear from someone in middle or high school who works with second language learners. That would be really interesting. Just if you're out there, I think that would be interesting. But I think that a lot of those issues of that movement from being pre-literate to being literate, and in many ways with visual literacy and verbal, so many different kinds of literacies, kind of making that transition and starting to learn how to not just take information in, but to use it, or to differentiate, or to read for different purposes than just getting the words out, or. I mean, you'd have a better sense of the range than me, but I think that's a fascinating area. Sorry, that's a very personal, like you, write something and send it to us.
Michelle.
Thank you, and I really appreciate those examples. That's getting my brain thinking. Yeah, I like that.
What I wanted to ask now, I might have asked you this before, maybe privately, probably. So it's going to be 2 days, and a certain number of sessions each day, and a number of choices in each session. How is that going to work? Or have you thought about it yet?
We've definitely been thinking about it. I think Tasha's children may need her. There's a lot of thinking going on, and it's starting to take shape. I think what's most exciting is that I would really love for us to have an arc of experience, so that there's a kind of coherent, beginning, middle, and end, or moving through a learning process for the attendees. So that's what's guiding the choices from my perspective. There will be some concurrent sessions where people will have choices, and chances are good that we'll have some plenary sessions as well, because I think it's important to sort of have some ideas that everyone shares, so that we can sort of be on the same page and have some common lexicon for some of the ideas that are most critical, such as what does inquiry look like? And so the program is not settled yet. It will be published in January, so stay tuned for more details.
Looking forward to it. You got my interest up, that's for sure. And you'll have presentations and maybe chance for discussion among.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think each session will have opportunities for the attendees to interact with one another. But we're feeling kind of ambitious about trying some different kinds of formats as well. So again, I'm not ready to commit exactly what that's going to look like, although it does say on our website something that I would really like to try is Pecha Kucha style presentations, if folks are familiar with
I've
that.
done one of those. They are difficult to do. 6 minutes, right? 20 seconds each slide.
So it may not be exactly that specific format, but it is challenging. Even having just presented together with Tasha at the SLJ Summit when we had only 15 minutes to speak, it was very tight to try to get a complex idea out for in that period of time. But I really like the structure, the challenge that the structure provides, because I think it forces you to be very precise and concise.
You have to get
And
to the
also,
core.
yeah, but also I kind of think, everyone has things they're proud of and that they do at work. And in that spirit of understanding that when you're in a building with X number of other librarians, that that everyone has something to contribute.
Mm-hmm.
So
That is awesome.
yeah.
Well, definitely looking forward to it. We're past the hour, but definitely well worth the hour plus. I am excited. I'm sad I probably won't be able to make it, but yes, I will be tweeting back and forth with the attendees.
Excellent.
And
Maybe
I'll
we will have inspired you to do something in Hawaii so we can come visit you.
Oh, that would be cool. That would be cool. Anything else to add, Michelle? Thank you so much for inviting Tasha and Jole on.
Oh yeah,
Really
definitely. This is
valuable.
exciting. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And this is more of a teaser than anything else. So we're definitely going to need to know what the next step is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Thank you so much for having us.
thank you very much
Yeah.
for coming. And aloha, everyone, and we'll see you next week. And don't go away right yet, Tasha and Jole.
Okay.
Don't hang up on us. We'll talk to you just a little bit. And aloha, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Take care.